Okay, in the second part of this lesson, we're going to look at the 10 components that we identified in the first part and find out where they occur in the articles. Remember, we said that each of those 10 components tends to occur in a certain division. In IMRD, these are the divisions as a summary, and in IPTC, they tend to occur in the same order, but in a slightly different division. Now I'm going to let my graduate students tell you whether that's true in their exemplar articles.
Hi. My example article is kind of a typical kind of article. While reading this kind of article, it's like reading a story. Let me explain to you. First is the importance. The importance means that it's a reason why you jump into this topic and start the research. While you start the research, you will find a need that you need to complete. And then you will find that many people also find these kind of needs and they do a lot of research. Then this kind of research can be your framework. It means like you can make it like a reference and find your research goal. After you find the research goal, you can start to design your research details. And the research details depends on the different materials that you wanted to do the research. And then it's the testing methods. Testing methods is like different applications needs different testing methods. So the data patterns depends on the testing methods that you choose. And the comparisons depends on the research details that you design. And then is the interpretations. Interpretations explains all the data patterns and the comparisons in your articles. And then is the conclusion.
Hi, according to my mechanical engineering journal article, as we expect, the arrangement of the 10 components are exactly the same as the expected pattern in the last video. So you can see the component important needs research goal in the introduction divisions, framework, and research detail in the process divisions, testing method, data pattern, comparison, and interpretation in the testing method, as well as conclusion in the conclusion divisions. So it is certain that the claim location in this journal article is typical.
Hi, in the electrical engineering article, usually they also have 10 components, but in this article they are missing interpretation component. As you can see in the table, the first division introduction, they also have important need for work, framework, and research goal components. Usually the research goal should be in the first section. And the second division is process. There have the research detail components. The third division is process and testing division. Because in this article, there have two subsections is called experimental research. And in this experimental research, they will focus on data pattern, testing methods, comparison component. And the final will be conclusions.
Okay, so now we've seen the patterns that you've found in your articles and compared them to the typical pattern, but you've looked at a lot of different articles in your field. How commonly do they seem to follow the expected structure, or are there other structures that you've seen?
From my research review, most of them are very close to the typical pie that you showed in the video clip. But some of them, the framework may not be stated in the process division in IPTC type, or sometimes they will show in the end of the introduction divisions.
In my experience, some of the journal will prefer to put the experimental division at the last part of the article, or they will just pull out and make another file like supplemental information or appendix.
Right, so sometimes that extra material, because people would tend to skip over it anyway, and so they pull it out and put it at the end, or even in the online supplemental materials.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in electrical engineering field is also have on the components, but sometimes some paper is will have the appendix components. So what is the component?
Okay, yeah, sometimes in electrical engineering, particularly if there are things like algorithms or theorems, that, again, people don't need to see the whole thing necessarily. So they'll put that at the end or in the supplemental materials. So that usually can be counted as part of the process division. Okay, so what other variations have you seen in your articles?
In my article, they have the research goal. So they will focus on their work, but in this article, they should to put in the first session rather than they put in the second session.
Yeah, usually the research goal is found in the first section, right at the end of the introduction section. But in yours, it's more in the second section. And that makes it a little harder to find. In some electrical engineering articles, I've even seen it at the beginning of the process division. So you may need to look around a little bit. Again, there's more information on that in the textbook. Any other variations?
In my research field, sometimes they will do extra testings. Like the general testing is like electrochemical testing, but sometimes they will take the material to do the chemical testing or physical testing to emphasize the performance of the material.
And if they do that, sometimes they have like the testing method and then the data patterns and the comparisons, and then they'll have a second set of testing and data pattern and comparison. So you have like a cycle of the components, and it's not just one time. Yeah, we'll look at that more when we talk about the testing section in a later chapter.
Okay.
Okay. So which components did you find the easiest or the hardest to find?
When I was a newbie, I found out that the framework is like the hardest part because it's quite because when I was a newbie, we cannot distinguish the framework and research detail. Then the other component is the importance, because sometimes the order is right, it's really hidden in the introduction part, and it can make us confused.
Right.
And for the easy component is conclusions and data pattern. It's really clear, it's really obvious, have a graphics. And they have their own divisions.
You said too the importance sometimes in engineering is only one sentence, and sometimes it's not even there, particularly in a very math-oriented article. They may not even mention the importance. And the framework, I think that's a very common difficulty.
Yeah, and for me, sure, the conclusion component is really easy to find. And also the comparison part for me in my field is also really easy to find, because all the tables and all the graphs are all about the comparisons, because we are always comparing to the previous work or the commercial one or anything else. So the following interpretation sometimes is the most difficult to find, because they are hidden in the paragraph and followed by the comparison. So you have to look close. So if you didn't look close, then you'll miss it.
Right. Yeah, like all of those, the testing method and comparison and interpretation are all in the same paragraph often. In science, they tend to be separated more, but in engineering, they're often in the same paragraph. Again, we'll talk more about that later and talking about the testing division.
Okay.
And for me, the research detail component is very easy to find because we can look at the process, the division, and the hard part is will be framework component also.
Right. So why is the framework so difficult to find?
I think it's because we are used of this kind of experiment patterns. So we cannot conclude that this kind of thing is a framework.
Yeah, it's sort of mixed with need, because both talk about what other people have done. And it's very difficult for many people to find the framework at the beginning, like you said, when you're a newbie. But the longer you're in the field, you'll begin to recognize that very quickly. We'll talk more about that in chapter 5. So let's leave it until then. Now, again, how does knowing this help you to read an article more effectively, knowing about these components?
Yeah, as we discussed last time, this thing is really helpful for us to know where to read and where to focus. But it's more specifics. For example, in the process divisions, they contain of the framework and the research detail. But if you want to make the quick review, you just look at the research detail. But for the framework, it's quite common for your specific field. You can skip it and you just finish the research detail and go to review the next literature.
Mm-hmm. And in my research field, for me, my first side will be the comparison component. But actually, it's important, but the more important one is the interpretation. Because when you look at their explanation, then you would want to know the research details. Mm-hmm. So maybe in this pattern, that if you didn't know the components, then maybe you will miss some important part in this article. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And for me, we will easy to find where is the component and where is the division talking about that component in the article.
And again, once you know where these components are, you begin to recognize them, and then as you write your own article, you know where to put those things in as well. So, okay, I think that's good enough for this week, and again, next week we'll begin looking at the components in individual divisions in more detail.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so far we've been talking about claims, but I just want to mention quickly the support for those claims, the evidence and reasoning. The first claim of importance and need is supported by looking at the past research. And so in the introduction division, you often get a lot of citations of past research. The second one, the process, is supported by a detailed explanation of the current research. And then finally, your claim that you have added something to the field is based on data and reasoning from your current research. Now, this is just an introduction. We're going to talk more about those in lessons 7 through 9, but I just wanted to mention it for now. So your assignment for now is to look at the main component or components in each section of your exemplar article and see if that matches the expectations. And again, we'll go back to these in lessons 4 through 6, and we'll see each of them in more detail. But for now, it's just to get a general structure of the article so that you begin to understand that. And see if what you find in your exemplar articles matches the expected pattern shown in table 3.3. Remember, not all articles do. So simply write down whatever you find for your particular article.